Ooh, she look good today and every other day, each and every day. Hello, everyone. Welcome. I am just Shani, and today we're going to be watching TikTok story times. And I just want to thank you guys for Monday because y'all was putting it in. I got views out the bat. YouTube was like, your regular viewers have did the work and got your video out. So keep on liking and subscribing. I don't think y'all understand how important your likes, your comments really helps my channel. It's super important. Thank you so much. And while we're talking about subscribing, go ahead and subscribe, hit that like button and ring that bell so you'll be notified every time I post a new video. I forgot to clip my nails. It happens, but I changed my shirt. Yeah! Let's go in.
So story time. I promise you will be entertained, but if you start the story, please stay till the end. So when I was 5 years old, my entire family was killed in a car crash, and I was the sole survivor. When I turned 18, I decided to move out of state for college because I didn't really have any friends or family in the area anyway. I ended up going to Massachusetts. When I got there, I didn't really know anybody. It was a totally new environment. It was unfamiliar. It was kind of scary, but eventually I met a guy at the school. He was really nice. We started dating. Eventually we got a place together, and we lived in that house together for 3 years, and we were happy the whole time. Like, he's very, very sweet, very caring, very loving. You know, I just didn't feel alone for the first time, and it was absolutely wonderful. But around the 3-year mark, I started going through something. I started not to feel good. So obviously my first guess was pregnancy, so I took a pregnancy test, but that wasn't it. I was having like headaches and stomach aches and feeling nauseated all the time, feeling like extra sleepy, but it wasn't really like life-ruining symptoms. So I just started doing like ginger for the nausea and like soup if I had a tummy ache, you know, a little bit of Excedrin if I had a headache, you know, whatever, you make it work. But the symptoms just kind of kept getting worse. And like sometimes they would be so bad, I'd have a migraine or a nausea to the point that I couldn't even get up out of bed. And my boyfriend's like, babe, I think you should go see a doctor. And I'm like, what is a doctor gonna do? Like, it's not like I can't breathe. It's not like I have chest pain. I just have random unspecified symptoms. Like, what is he gonna do? But he's like, babe, like, you do not feel good. Like, you should go see a doctor. And I'm like, fine, whatever. So he schedules me a doctor's appointment. I go see the doctor, and it's exactly what I thought it was gonna be. The doctor is just like, there's nothing wrong with you. And I'm like, cool. So I go back home, and things don't get better, but they start to get worse. Because now I'm not just feeling physically bad, I'm feeling bad mentally. And I don't mean my emotions. I'm not sad or depressed. I'm dealing with confusion. I keep finding things in my house in weird places that they shouldn't be. I open my kitchen drawer to get out cutlery, fork, knife. All my earrings are in there. I go look at my jewelry rack. All my cutlery's in there. Paintings that were hanged on the wall are like turning upside down. And at first I'm just like, okay, you know, whatever, these things are very bizarre, but they're not really frightening. Like, I'm just trying to make this logical or reasonable in any way that I can. But I'm forgetting appointments. My fatigue is increasing. Like, it's just so much happening. And then it starts off slow. Little shadows of, like, in my peripheral vision, little sounds. And you know, like, you can have those things normally. Like, I think we all have those things occasionally, but they're coming more common and more frequent, and I'm starting to lose like time, like whole days I cannot remember. So finally I make myself an appointment. I go see a therapist. She does the intake, my assessment, and she's like, okay, you fit the diagnostic criteria for schizophrenia. So that was kind of like hard to hear, but at the same time I was thinking, okay, well, now we know what's wrong with me, I can get some help. And my therapist assured me, like, the medication we have these days can make your symptoms like almost nothing. You can go back to living a normal life. And I'm very grateful. I'm like, okay, good. So I break the news to my boyfriend, which was really scary because he was such a sweet and supportive person. I was just scared of being too much of a burden on him or losing him because he was kind of the only person that I had. But he was super sweet, super supportive. He held me while I cried. He went to go pick up my medication for me after running me a bath, like, you know, just really taking care of me. So I start taking my medicines, but things do not get better. In fact, they get worse because any kind of visuals or auditory hallucinations I was having are becoming more and more and more defined. And we switch medications like 2 or 3 times, and my therapist is like, oh, sometimes, you gotta switch medications a couple times until you find what works. But things are actively getting worse, and I'm seeing and hearing things in my house, and I know that, like, it feels so real. So at this point, I become convinced that I'm not sick, but my house is haunted. I know that sounds insane, but when you are dealing with so much confusion, bizarre things in your house, bizarre noises, like, you become afraid and you're willing to believe almost like anything that could possibly make things better. So I start getting into like these spiritual people talking about the paranormal, and I start trying to like do different things, like I'm burning sage, I'm doing like, whatever. And finally one day my boyfriend has to go help his dad with something. So he leaves me home alone, and I don't fully know what happened, but I do know that apparently I ended up leaving my house a little bit scantily clad, and apparently I was just kind of running around aimlessly, got picked up by the police, taken to the hospital, and obviously psych. And I wake up in the hospital, and as soon as I wake up, the nurse is all over me, like white on rice. And she tells me to just wait right there a moment. And I don't know how much time has passed. All I know is that I just woke up in the hospital. And I'm in a room by myself, completely isolated. There's nobody else there. And she comes back with a doctor, my therapist, 3 people, a man, a woman, and another girl. And they're all nicely dressed, beautiful people. And they look really familiar to me. But I'm like, I don't know. I'm not sure of anything anymore. And somebody who is not in a hospital uniform, and that person is in a police uniform. So now I'm looking at this cop and this room full of people like, what did I do? What did I do? I'm afraid. So I asked them, like, am I in trouble? Am I in trouble? And they're like, no, you're not in trouble. You're not in trouble. But, I'm thinking they're just saying that to get me to, like, talk about whatever it was that happened. So the cop is, he's asking me all these questions. Then the doctor cuts in and asks questions. And the nurse is writing a bunch of things down. And the therapist is writing a bunch of things down. But their questions are, like, mad normal. They're just like, what's your name? How old are you? Where did you go to school? Where did you grow up? Tell us about your family. Da da da. And I'm like, okay, like, where are we getting to all this? And I'm just assuming, I've never been in this situation before, in like a psych, whatever. So I'm just sitting there thinking like, okay, whatever. I don't know their policy. So finally, they end up telling me that they have to give me some news. And my heart is pounding out of my chest at this point, because what news are you about to give me? I guarantee you guys cannot predict what the news was. My name was not the name that I thought I was. In fact, I was not the girl that I thought that I was. Apparently, when I was 17, I was working at the country club that my parents were a part of, and I was a lifeguard. And there was a boy there whose family was not part of the country club, but he had like a small summer job washing dishes or something. And he developed a very unhealthy fixation on me. And he made me very uncomfortable, and he was following me and watching me, and my family was very worried about it. My friends were very worried about it, but I wasn't worried about it because I was just like, whatever, I'm going to be leaving for college soon, and I was an Ohio kid, and I was going to the Ohio State University, and I was very excited about that. The boy, when the summer ended, went to college, and guess where he went to college? Massachusetts. The boyfriend that I had been living with for 3+ years, he actually kidnapped me, took me to Massachusetts, made me shave my head and wear wigs, used a combination of hypnosis tactics, medicines, and illegal substances and abuse to brainwash me into thinking I was a totally different girl. He told me that my family had died in a car crash. That was absolutely not true. My entire family is alive and well, and they were the 3 people that were in the hospital room when I woke up. He was using sedatives and hallucinogens and any illegal substance basically he could get his hands on to make me think that I was going crazy so that my dependence on him would never end. Oh, and I know that you're probably thinking, oh, but didn't he tell you to go to the doctor? Yeah, he did. The doctor he sent me to was his dad, who was previously a doctor but lost his nursing license for basically being inappropriate with patients. And get this, his father was a serial unaliver responsible for the deaths of 8 women in Hyannis. And when I was taken into the hospital, they were finally able to identify me and give me my life back. If you stayed until the end of this video, that was completely fake. That was only for entertainment purposes. None of those things happened to me. I do make original horror content. I am an author and a poet. I hope you guys liked my story. If you stayed for the whole thing, if you would like to see more original horror content on my channel, comment down below. I really hope you guys were entertained by that. Thanks.
Bitch, what? Bitch, what? Why do people do that? Why would she do that to us? Because I was all invested. Like, what? This don't even sound like a real story. When the moment you say this don't sound real, it's not real. But you know, real life is stranger than fiction. So that could have really happened. Like, I know y'all listened to Calls from Beyond last night, Tuesday night. I know y'all listened to her story, the first woman who called. Speaking of which, you know, they need to stop all the talking. Like, I love all the talking. Love it. If this was just a talking show, like a talking podcast, I would love it. I would listen to it all day. When we came from the Calls from Beyond, we came from that. I think they did like 3 calls yesterday. Anyway, she talked about her being kidnapped by a family when she was like, I can't remember how old she was. She was adopted or whatever. And they just, she talked about that. So this is real life stuff. She just sucked me in. Girl. That was good though. I ain't gonna lie. That's a good book, girl. That's a good book right there. I'll read it. I'll buy it, girl. Go follow her so we can find that book. We gotta get that book because it got us. We was invested. You were. That was wow.
Okay, so this particular scary story, I'm gonna use certain words for privacy reasons, but this did happen in real life. Okay, so there was a particular person who kept getting dreams about the afterlife. Okay. They kept seeing their friends coming back and talking to them that had passed away. And in this particular dream this person had, okay, let me just say this. The person answered the phone, okay? Let's say his name was Bob. Bob answered the phone, and on the phone was a friend he had gone to school with, okay? This friend said, you know, they were just chatting it up, you know what I mean? Like, oh, how you doing? I know you enjoying heaven. Bob was thinking that the person, since he had passed away, had gone to heaven, right? So Bob's like, I know, man. I know you enjoying heaven, man. You know, just trying to catch up with the man, right? And the person on the other end of the phone said, Bob, I'm not in heaven, bro. And Bob is like, what? What do you mean you're not in heaven? Like, I know you in heaven. And Bob's friend says, I'm not in heaven. And then he started to amp up his voice to, like, not scream, but like make him understand, like, yo, this is serious and I'm not there, right? And he says in the phone, tell my sons hell is real, Bob. So Bob wakes up and he's like, I had this horrible nightmare. And he's like, my friend from high school, he said he wasn't in heaven. And he said to tell his sons hell is real. And he looks up, Bob looks over at his spouse and goes, I didn't even know this man had sons. I thought he had one child. And Bob's spouse says, yeah, he has multiple children. So the scary thing about this is Bob didn't know he had more than one child. So how did the person in the dream that was on the phone with Bob say, tell my sons hell is real?
No. That's not what I'm worried about. What I'm worried about is how Bob's wife know that he had multiple children. How did Bob's wife know that Bob's friend had multiple children? That's what I want to know. Girl, bye. Did he at least find out who the children was? Like, and tell them, hey, like, what did he do? Because Bob over here thinking that he was a upright, upstanding man, like a heavenly destined man. Like clearly he was living a double life. Clearly, if he had multiple children that nobody knew about except Bob's wife.
This was the real-life Beetlejuice. In the summer of 1952, the small town of Larkspur, Maine, was consumed by an unexplainable tragedy. It all began when Arthur Gibbons, the local undertaker, started speaking about a voice he heard from beneath the cemetery. He claimed it whispered to him in the dead of night, promising to bring the dead back for one simple exchange, a name. Few believed him until strange things began happening in town. Graves were found empty, their headstones cracked in two, and the bodies gone. The townspeople grew terrified, suspecting grave robbers or worse. But Arthur's behavior became more erratic. He spent nights by the cemetery gate, muttering and digging into the earth with his bare hands. One evening, Arthur stopped showing up to work. His wife Agnes went to the cemetery looking for him. There, under the flickering lamplight, she found her husband, lifeless, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. But what haunted Agnes most wasn't Arthur's death. It was the deep, freshly dug hole behind him. As the sun set, Agnes stepped closer to the pit, her heartbeat heavy in her chest. From the blackness below, a familiar whisper echoed up to her, just loud enough for her to hear. Say it, say the name. She staggered back, realizing too late the true cost of the deal her husband had made. The ground began to tremble and open up below her, swallowing her into the depths of the earth. When investigators looked into the missing persons case of Arthur and Agnes, they stumbled upon something horrific in the graveyard.
What did they find? I hate when stuff leave you like that. Well, we kind of know what they found. They found the two bodies. But yo, imagine, like, if that's a true story, imagine, y'all do your research, because we just watched the other story, which was a story, it wasn't real. We can't believe nothing out here in these streets. We gotta do our own research, clearly. And sometimes the research they be putting lies, in the textbooks and everything, child. But yo, can you imagine?
This is a disturbing memory from my young childhood. I was about 7 or 8 years old. My mom would usually take my brother and I trick-or-treating, but this particular year, after school, she dropped me off at my friend Sean's house, where Sean, our friend Johnny, and I would go together. Johnny and Sean were a year older than me. We met while I was playing with my brother on the block. Johnny and Sean lived around the block from me. Sean had a weird upbringing that I never really understood. His sister was like 20 years old. There was a big gap between them. She was always his caretaker, it seemed, whenever I was at his house. His house always smelled like cat, and his sister always had a different guy over, it seemed like. His sister was always cold to me, in the sense that she never acknowledged me or say hi or anything. Sean's dad was never in the picture, and his mom, I believe, was always working out of town, I guess. I only met Sean's mom a few times. We never really stayed in touch for long enough for me to figure all of this out. Anyway, my mom dropped me off at Sean's, expecting that Sean's mom would be trick-or-treating with us. After saying goodbye, I went into his house. Johnny was already there. We all had big pillow sacks to fill with candy. This was around the time that I learned that neither Sean's mom nor sister were coming with us to supervise. I was young, so I sort of felt slightly uncomfortable knowing that Johnny and Sean would be leading the way, but at the same time, I felt a sense of excitement that we'd have more freedom. I knew for a fact my mom would not have approved of us going unsupervised, though. So, eventually, we were off into the neighborhood, walking around doing our rounds door to door. Quite a few people asked if we were alone or where our parents were, and Johnny would always be the one to use the same lie, that his mom is up ahead with his sister. It worked every time. This was on a Friday, so we didn't get to start at trick-or-treating until around 5 o'clock. But we didn't have school the next day, so we intended on going until our pillow sacks were completely full. We took a break after a couple of hours and went to Sean's, where he heated up a bunch of frozen pizzas. At the time, I was so jealous of the apparent freedom he had in his house, not having parents who cared about what he did. But looking back now, I count myself super blessed to have grown up in a household with 2 strict parents. After we hung out at his house for an hour and watched Halloween specials on Nickelodeon while eating pizza and candies, Johnny eventually was picked up by his mom, but Sean and I wanted to keep going, so we eventually headed back out for round 2. It was dark out now, and it had to be past 8 p.m. There were a lot less trick-or-treaters now. We tried to go to certain blocks we hadn't gone down yet, which meant straying further away from Sean's house. We found a block we hadn't touched yet and continued knocking on doors. Some houses didn't answer at this hour, and mostly everyone else had a comment about us being alone or how it's getting late. We noticed a man pushing a stroller a couple houses down behind us. He was walking very slowly in our direction, probably a dad trick-or-treating for his young child. As we continued going door to door, the man with the stroller got closer. Eventually, we heard him going shh and singing softly. Eventually, he caught up to us, and he said, "How's the trick-or-treating going, boys?" And we replied, "Good," at the same time. And then he said, "It's pretty late. I'm on my way back to my house. I can give you guys the rest of my candy." Sean and I looked at each other with telling faces, as if we just hit the jackpot. Sean asked what kind of candies, and he said a bunch of bags of different things. He said he didn't get to give much away because he wanted to take his daughter out for a trick-or-treat stroll. He did have a bag dangling on one of the handles of the stroller, which was filled with some candies. The stroller was fully covered by a folding piece on the top, so we couldn't see his daughter. He said she's asleep and he didn't want to wake her up, but he pointed ahead and said his house is just up this way. So we followed behind him as he pushed the stroller. He was walking a little faster now. As we walked, I realized there was next to no one else out at this point, even though it was a Friday night. It seemed like a quieter side of the neighborhood. The man talked to us as we walked, asking us questions. What part of the neighborhood we were from, where we went to school, basic stuff. I let Sean answer most of the questions. Him being even just a year older than me at that age, I felt like he was the one who should take lead. On multiple occasions as we walked, the man would lean into the stroller and talk in a high pitch to his daughter, then he'd turn back and smile at us. We finally made it to his house. He led us up the walkway with the stroller and unlocked his door. After he opened it, he brought the stroller with his daughter inside first, and then invited us to come inside. Sean led the way, so I followed. I was the one to ask if we could leave the door open, and the man paused, and then said, "Yeah, of course." He said he'll be right back as he goes to get the candy bags. He pushed the stroller into the middle of the living room, only about 10 feet away from where we were standing. I nudged Sean because I felt uncomfortable. I whispered, "Why would he leave the candy so far away?" Sean didn't respond. Instead, he turned toward the living room and then walked up to the stroller. He lifted up the folding part that was covering the baby, and he looked disturbed. He hurried back to me, whispering, "Let's go." He was full on running once we got outside, and I followed behind, which was a bit tougher because we had those heavy pillow sacks. I still was confused about what he saw, but just then, we heard a woman's voice yell, "Excuse me." It was one of his neighbors. She came running over to us and asked if we know that man, and it was at this point that Sean spilled the beans and said he offered us his leftover candy, but he was pushing a stroller with a fake baby in it. I remember getting goosebumps as he said that. The woman said, "Yeah, that man doesn't have a child. I saw you was walking by with him." She took us to her car and drove each of us home. I know, getting into a stranger's car after that was another questionable move. The woman came to my front door to talk to my mom about what we just told her. My mom was distraught. After I told her every last detail about the night, she sent me to my room while my parents called the police on that man. My parents never told me anything about what happened after that. I believe they wanted to shelter me from any more exposure to the situation. My mom didn't want me going over to Sean's house anymore, and I know she had quite a bit to say to Sean's mom. I did see Sean at school once in a while still, and we remained cordial, but our friendship was never the same after that night.
Girl, the whole time I was like, this is bad. This is a bad situation. This is some bad stuff. Some questionable decisions. It's not good. Like, because we all been there. We made some questionable decisions when we were younger, knowing that our parents was like, don't do this, don't do that, don't talk to strangers, don't be following people, don't go in people's houses. I still have those decisions in my real life. I be like, I'm a grown adult. I'm a grown adult. I still be like, should I go in this person's house? Like, because you know, older women, they just be like, come on in, it's cold out there, come on in. You're just like, should I? I'm good. Because you still don't want to get snatched like old people can snatch you. Like, you know, you still, I feel like I'm still snatchable. I don't want to get snatched, unless you fine, you know. But still, I don't want to be snatched. So it's just like, girl, those decisions, I was like, no. Like, you know, like sometimes God be like, all right, now, you being greedy. Let me teach you a lesson, because that they was being greedy. They had enough candy. You had to go back out and find out, girl. You ain't had to find out. Child. I'm just glad it all worked out. I'm glad he was just like, let me go check and see what's going on, because that could have been bad. Bad. So I'm glad they got out that situation. Subscribe.